7-year itch. Join us in welcoming Vanessa Brown. And now, here's your man of the half hour, Skippy Lowe.
Vanessa Brown.
Hi, Skip.
Hi. Quiz Kid. The original Quiz Kid. I mean, come on. On radio?
On radio.
Now,
Out of Chicago.
in Chicago, Illinois?
Well, I was in a play called Watch on the Rhine.
Right.
And they came backstage and they said to the general manager, who do you think would do best? Because Skippy Homeyer had done it.
Yes.
And it turned out okay. The Tomorrow the World had played Chicago.
Right.
So they decided they might as well go with another child actor. You know? And there were 6 of us in the show. There was Ann Blythe, I understudied Ann, and there were 2 boys and 2 understudy boys. And the manager said that I would do the best, and so that's how I got on the show the first time. And I turned out okay, so they scored me.
They scored you.
Yeah.
God. First, Vienna. Born in Vienna,
Right.
Paris,
Yeah.
came to America as a young girl.
Yes. I had my 10th birthday in New York City.
First show.
First show was Watch on the Rhine.
Was that the first?
Yes.
The very, very first.
Well, no. Let's see. See, I went to a very nice junior high school, Joan of Arc Junior High School in 118, and out of that I was picked to be a young reviewer. And that was the junior board of the National Board of Review of Motion Pictures. And we got to meet people like Walt Disney, who would come in to talk to us. You know, I was so amazed. Here's Walt Disney, and he's coming to talk to 11-year-olds. But he was interested. And then I interviewed him later. And that's the interesting thing. Well, anyway, the young reviewers had a radio program.
Right.
And it was called Children Also Are People. It was on CBS Radio. And they picked me and 3 boys to be really children. I mean, you know, in other words, children are also people. There was a lot of adults talking, but I mean, they also picked us. And so there was a lot of publicity out of that. So basically, I did 1 television show for the NBC Pioneer station, television station, and I did that radio program for CBS Radio.
Right.
And then I went into Watch on the Rhine.
Who was on that show? Do you remember?
Paul Lucas, Lucille Watson, Mady Christians, John Lodge, who was the brother of the guy who was at the UN, and very famous Boston family, and George Coulouris played the villain. Helen, I'm not sure whether her name was Dodge or not, but she played like the secondary love interest. And then there were 3 children and 3 understudy children. And we had a wonderful stage manager named Felix Jacovis. And Herman Shumlin produced and directed the show. It was a play written by Lillian Hellman. It won the Pulitzer Prize.
Really? It was great, yes.
Yeah, and we did 2 tours, 2 national tours.
Then you came to Hollywood.
Yes.
Yes?
David O. Selznick saw a performance in New York, and because my agent was Paul Kohner, he had me take some stills. I think one of those we sent to you.
Right.
The headshots with the braid where it made me look like Bergman.
Go ahead.
Well, that was taken by Maureen. She was a photographer, and Kohner showed those to Selznick. And I guess either before or after David had seen the show, the 1 performance that I played in when Ann got sick. And he signed me, but it was a conditional thing. You'd have to come to Hollywood before the money started. But I had Quiz Kids to go back to, so my mother and I traveled to Chicago, and I did 2 Quiz Kids shows.
Right.
And they give you a $50 bond, and so that paid for the rest of the trip to California. And when I came out here, David O. Selznick paid me. In other words, when I got here. And I got $125, and I was under contract to David O. Selznick.
At 20th.
No, at which is now the Laird Studio, which is then Selznick International.
But you did a lot of films at 20th, though.
But that was later.
Later?
In 1945 to 47, I was under contract.
At 20th?
Yes.
Because you did pictures with Betty Grable, Mother Wore Tights.
Yeah, that was a wonderful.
I mean, that was a very good picture. I love that Betty Grable on the set.
The thing is wonderful. First of all, I liked her very much.
Betty Grable?
One of the nicest people, most down-to-earth, levelest people. I mean, I remember asking her, what are you going to do when you can't dance anymore?
Right.
She said to me, I will not go on at all after that. In other words, this is what I do best, this is what I'm good at, and then I will quit.
You worked Gene Tierney, one of my favorite films, with Rex Harrison and Gene Tierney and
The Ghost and Mrs. Muir.
The Ghost of Mrs. Muir. Tell me about that. You were very young in that film.
I was about 17.
17? Mm-hmm. Tell me about that movie, working with this great lady. I love her.
Well, the thing is, Jean was beautiful, and she was a very, very fine actress, and she had done a picture for Joe Mankiewicz before.
Right.
Joe Mankiewicz was the director on the film, and I had done a film for him before called The Late George Apley.
Right.
So, I mean, I'll tell you a very funny story, which is not,
Go ahead. Love to
not
hear it.
terribly tactful
That's okay.
of me. But anyway, we did retakes on The Late George Apley when Joe was in New York.
Right.
And I had been a great favorite of Joe's. We got along very well. I knew the family. I knew Sarah and Herman Mankiewicz, and I knew Frank at school at UCLA. Anyway, we would have long conversations, and I guess Adele must have been a little jealous, the executive secretary.
Right.
Anytime you get close to somebody, you know, who's considered a big man, then there's a lot of people saying, my God, you know.
Yes.
I mean, so anyway, I did it out of a joke. We did retakes with Ernest Lubitsch. Lubitsch did the retakes because Peggy Cummings was a favorite of Zanuck, and so we got retakes.
Peggy Cummings is the English actress.
Yes, but she played the other part in The Late George Apley.
Right.
So they rewrote a scene for her and me, where she gives me advice, and I go in this dowdy wedding dress, and she says to me, now you go to New York and get Uncle Ronald Coleman to buy you a good outfit so you look good, you know? Never mind this old stuff.
Right.
Anyway, we go into the dressing room before the take, and there's the great Mr. Lubitsch, and he says something very flattering to me. You know, there's a thinking actress. And I was so happy that for the first time after all these years it was considered a plus to be a thinking actress, you know. I mean, you don't know what I went through before then, because at that time, if you had any kind of intelligence, you had to hide it below a low bosom, or you were not considered sexy. And that cost you jobs if you were not considered sexy. So anyway, I was so happy with this compliment of Mr. Lubitsch's that I waltzed myself into Joe's office, and Joe was in New York, and I said to Adele, I just forgot everything, and I said, now Lubitsch, there's a director for you. Well, the next thing I know, they are testing June Lockhart for my part in The Ghost and Mrs. Muir.
Oh, no.
So I figured I did something wrong. What did I do wrong? And I figured it out. So I went to visit Joe on the set of The Ghost and Mrs. Muir. Joe was delighted to see me. God knows what Adele had told him. And he walked me to the door, and I was back in the picture.
I love it.
Isn't that awful?
That's great.
It's
Lana
awful.
Turner, The Bad and the Beautiful. What a great movie. Lana.
I only know stories about Lana. I did not work with her. I worked with Kirk Douglas, and I worked with Barry Sullivan.
So
and
you did your scenes with Kirk Douglas?
Yes. In other words, the picture is more or less divided into three parts.
Right.
The way I got the film is interesting because it shows you the influence of television upon the movies. Now, John Houseman was a very good friend of the Mankiewicz's, so I would see him frequently, you know, but never in business context. I couldn't get in the door at Metro to see even the second most important casting man, so I went to New York, took a lot of stuff with me, and decided to do, you know, a lot of live television interviews and stuff, and just stay alive. So I did the show of shows, the Max Liebman thing.
Of course.
Song and dance, you know, with Carl Reiner and Howie Morris. And the next day, my agent calls up, Houseman and Minnelli want you. Is this sufficient money? I mean, I not only didn't have to go through the office, you know, but they were asking me if it was sufficient money. So I said, it's sufficient money. I have only one problem. I have too much luggage with me, and it'll be too expensive to go, you know, they were wanting me to go back first class.
Right.
And I had come in tourist. And I thought maybe of packing everything up and sending it parcel post. So I had this friend of mine at in the marketing department at Metro, very nice friend, and I called him up and I said, Dan, do you know a cheap way to send stuff across the country And he said, let's go back on this one, Vanessa. Let me hear this one again. And he said, don't be ridiculous. After what they did to you, we'll hire 2 front seats and we'll get all your junk back.
I love it. Voice of the radio. I mean, let's face it.
Voice of America.
Voice of America.
Yeah, that was the best thing. That really...
You know, your voice has been over that radio constantly. Voice of America. Tell me about that.
I used to have a sheep ranger in Australia write me regularly. Could I have had a chance to visit him?
Right.
I didn't.
You didn't
follow up on that.
You didn't follow up.
No. However, the Voice of America, I was practically the bureau chief here from 62 to 82.
Right.
Just about. I mean, the Munich desk came in, Ed Gordon, and took over, and then they opened up the formal office. So in effect, it ran out of my house for a long time. But Murrow hired me, Edward R. Murrow, and I outlasted Murrow, Carl Rowan, and Mr. Chancellor. And I did some wonderful work, and we're using that as a basis for What Do You Want to Be Tomorrow. We were using those audio tapes.
Vanessa, looking back over your career, I mean, when you were a child, you even wanted to be a journalist ever since. Not an actress, but a journalist.
I think I was much more oriented towards political history, and because of my father's influence on me.
Oh, really?
Well, he taught me from the age of 3 on. I mean, he had come from Russia in 1917. His mother had given him a boat, and the revolution was on, and she said, go, my son. And he took this canoe, and he went down the river, and the border there was open.
Right.
So he walked across 4 countries, and he got to Vienna, and eventually met my mother in Vienna. So what I'm saying to you is I'm really a product of the historical forces that were happening in 1928 when I was born. And when I was going to kindergarten, my father would draw the sled, and they'd take me to this Montessori kindergarten. I had a very good education early.
Right.
And my mother was a psychologist, and she was a student of Alfred Adler, and my father was a linguist and a writer. And my father's first... You know, he was always teaching me things, always taking time, took a lot of time to show me the different parts of the cities that we lived in.
Right.
And there was an electrical strike at the time. It was Schuschnigg, who was, I think, a socialist. I'm not sure. But anyway, Schuschnigg was the Prime Minister of Austria.
Right.
And there was an electrical workers' strike, so they had to pick me up from kindergarten early because I couldn't stay there.
Right.
Because it was dark in the winter. So I missed the kindergarten. That was the fun part. It was a wonderful thing. You learned with compasses, and you learned with colors, and the fun place. So I said, why did we have to leave? And then there was a week that we didn't go to there.
Right.
So he said, he explained it to me, and he explained it in terms that I'll never forget. And he said, because we later on, when we went back, there were bullet holes in the bathrooms.
Right.
You know, this was in a workers' low-income housing development, and the bells were hanging like this. There'd been a shootout.
Right.
So that's why the kindergarten was closed. So he explained in terms that I remember to this day and that I understood, and it was like my biggest lesson. He said, if the railroad workers had stuck with the electrical workers, the government would not have been able to bring troops in on the railroads and shoot up the electrical workers. And the moral was, if people don't stick together, they die separately. And that is a wonderful lesson to learn that early.
Vanessa, I mean, you came to Hollywood, you became a wonderful actress. A thinking actress, let's see, a thinking actress, right?
Yeah.
But look at this picture. I got to show my audience. Look.
Wagon Train.
What? Is this from Wagon Train?
Wagon Train, NBC, I think.
NBC?
Yeah.
What is this from?
This was a still by John Engstead. He shot me over the years. He was a very fine still photographer, and that was used for the sheet music Vanessa by Bernie Wayne, and that was used for The Fighter. Remember The Fighter?
Yes, of course, The Fighter. There, you are on Life magazine on the cover. Look at Vanessa Brown.
That was during the 7-year itch days, and that's Philippe Halsman is the photographer.
You originated the 7-year itch on Broadway.
Right.
Right?
Yes. Marilyn played my part later.
And Marilyn Monroe played it in the film later. Tell me about on Broadway, The 7-Year Itch. What kind of reaction was that show on Broadway at that time? That's
we had a huge hit. In other words, when we were playing New Haven, Tommy Ewell said to me, "Sweetie, we have a hit." I said, "How do you know?" He says, "I know." And then, you know, I was it for, the girl was it, and I was it for 2 years.
Sir. Vanessa Brown, this is my favorite picture. This
Really?
is Vanessa Brown, like I think of Vanessa Brown.
Really? That was Warner
Why?
Brothers.
Yes, but
Second
why?
contract.
Why do I think of Vanessa Brown in this
know.
picture than any other picture?
I don't know.
Where is this from? It's just,
That was taken at the Warner Brothers still photography, but the jacket my mother made. I mean, it's a hand-sewn jacket.
this is the thinking actress, I know. Oh, this is beautiful, Vanessa.
This is Oleg Cassini gown, and it's an Engstead picture.
Uh-huh.
It was shot approximately 1950.
Where is it really?
Yeah.
Enjoyed doing those movies those days because you're such a
Yes.
bright lady. I mean, you know,
Yes.
you've had such great education, you know.
Well, I mean, one thing doesn't hurt another.
Do you
I mean, the thing that was hard is
quiz girl.
that if you had to, if you had to eat,
Yes.
that means you had to work frequently. And Paul Kohner got me wonderful contracts. I mean, first Selznick, and then Warner Brothers, and then Mervyn LeRoy,
Right.
and then Fox, and in between there was a picture for Frank Borzage.
Right.
So I mean, I got really top people. But when you were under contract, inevitably the producers and directors, like at Warner Brothers, like Michael Curtiz and Henry Blanket, they
Right.
would always hire outside.
Right.
At Fox, it was a little better.
It was more freer.
Well, it was a little better because I saw Zanuck very early in the game, and they said, "My God, you're seeing Zanuck!" Woo! And Zanuck promised to make a big star out of me. Well, the next thing they put me into a bit in Margie, what Henry
With
King
Jeannie
was
Crane.
Henry King was the
Yes,
director.
Henry King, the director.
So I shouldn't complain, you know what I
Right,
mean? In
right.
other words, they were, and they groomed you. I mean, they groomed you. First of all, you had the publicity department working overtime to make your name
Right.
a commodity.
Right.
And a very nice department run by Harry Brand, and some of the people are still there. I talked to one of them the other day, and we made good friends. I mean, Gene Peters was my friend, Colleen Townsend was my friend. You know, people that we
Right.
stay together.
Do you still see them?
Yes.
You see your
Oh, yeah.
friends?
Oh,
Jean
yes.
Peters, how is she
Yes.
doing
She's
now?
doing very nicely.
Is she?
She's unfortunately lost her husband recently, but she's doing very nicely.
Vanessa, why don't we have the system anymore? Why doesn't
Well,
someone come with the studio system?
It's a shame because there was an awful lot going for it. For example, we had dance lessons at Fox. We
Right.
had
Fencing,
speech lessons.
speech.
The thing is, even Marilyn came on the dance class one day, and she was like this, a little Angora sweater with the short shorts. And she said, "Can I come in here too?" And I said, "If you're under contract, you can come in. I mean, this is for us contract players." And then I told her about these free music lessons that were available. She said, "Free music lessons?" And that's when she went over to the Newmans, you know, and learned that she could do that.
Did you
because
get to know her later in the years?
I
after?
saw her every so often. Like I saw her when she was married to Yves Montand.
Oui.
And she looked very happy. And I said, "You look very happy." And she said, "So do you."
Was she just carefree little girl?
Well,
like,
at that point, she was happy. I tried to go see her mother once.
you did.
They wouldn't let me. They wouldn't
Why
let me
would
see her.
Vanessa Brown would like to do that? Why did you do that?
I just wanted to find out more about Marilyn's background.
Really?
I was interested in. I've always been interested in the people that I worked with, and I felt sorry for Marilyn because she was going from man to man.
She really was?
Well, I mean, marrying them even. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know anything illicit. And then I thought her death was tragic, but
Accident?
I don't think she killed herself.
You don't think she killed
No.
herself?
I don't
So
think
it was an accident.
I think that the psychiatrist who treated her is guilty of murder. And I've
Really?
always thought so, and I called him up and told him that.
You did?
Yeah. And I went down to CBS and I went down to NBC because my girlfriend told me, "Go, help her, you know, get her a good obit at least."
I
The
see.
thing is, she did not kill herself. I wasn't there.
Yes. Yeah.
But I just don't think so. Marilyn was not a suicidal type.
I see.
What happened is she probably was so distressed she
Yes.
couldn't sleep. The housekeeper left, and she was alone.
And she forgot how many pills she took.
That's right, and maybe she took a sip of her drink.
Yeah.
You know, just to fall asleep.
Yes, exactly.
And she called up the last friend, and they'd say, well, listen, honey, I got to go to dinner. You know, my wife is, you know, whatever. And she had no one to talk to.
Yeah. It's a lonely time to be.
I mean, that was a very rough time.
Yeah.
And what I was bothered with is that she was talented, and she had a lot of ambition and a lot of energy, and I felt the studio was guilty of murder, too, because they used her.
Yes.
They made a lot of money. An awful lot of people made a lot of money.
Well, that's what Hollywood's about, though.
Well, I hate to see this, you know, Jimmy Dean and Marilyn, you know, now they're dead. Now they're being
Everyone's
worshipped.
making money.
Now they're being worshipped.
Yeah. Why is that? Why is it? Because of money? Someone out there trying to make money on that?
Well, obviously, somebody's selling the photographs, somebody's selling the books, somebody is spinning the yarns, you know. But it feeds on something that people need. People need heroes. People need beautiful people to look up to. People want to believe.
Is that what you think Jimmy Dean's so powerful today, and Marilyn? They keep that name alive, and
somebody's keeping it alive. I mean, there's obviously somebody that's interested in keeping it alive. I mean, the Presley thing didn't start by itself.
Presley, yeah.
I mean, there was a manager there who was interested.
Right.
And there are people that are benefiting from the sale of the records and the memorabilia and all of that.
Yes.
There's always some member of the family, like the Edward, the Tarzan people.
Yes.
Mr. Burroughs died broke. But now there is a Tarzana, and there is a whole foundation run by the nephew, and they have these conventions.
I don't see Clark Gable so big today.
Who does he have? Mrs. Spreckles?
Yeah.
I mean, who does he have pushing him? Nobody pushes him.
No pushes Clark Gable.
Well, if no one pushes him, then he's forgotten.
He was Mr. Movies, don't you think?
Wonderful, wonderful actor.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Stanley Kramer.
I worked with him.
Love him. Yes, you did a movie.
Yeah, I did Bless the Beast and the Children, and I interviewed him for The Voice of America, a great filmmaker. And I understand he has a daughter in the business.
Right, I interviewed her.
Yeah,
Catherine.
and I saw her
singing.
No, I didn't see her singing. I mean, I saw her on the lot or something. And she said that her father was preparing a new film.
Right. Oh, really?
So I didn't know that. I mean, I didn't know. I had been told that he was working on the Valenza story. You know, the Polish leader.
Leader, yes, yes.
But I hadn't heard anything lately, so I don't know what it is.
I know they're back in town. They moved back from Seattle. Vanessa Brown, this picture. I mean, is this a fashion?
That's Philippe Holzman again, and he shot the cover, and that was the story on Stoles.
On Stoles?
And that is a funny story.
Oh, really? Tell us the story.
Well,
love to hear it.
You see, during the 7-year itch, I had already been inside the book for the show, and when you're the hit of the season, you get invited to the 2 big balls.
Right.
One is the March of Dimes at the Waldorf, and the other one is the April in Paris. I think it's also at the Waldorf. Anyway, big affairs. And at the March of Dimes show, I was given some text, you know, and I just thought it wasn't appropriate. And so the stage manager's running around, and I said, would you mind if I put this in my own words? And he said, no, honey, go ahead. You know, I mean, he couldn't be bothered. So, okay, so I had helped design this dress, this thing with on the Life cover, you know, it was a red strapless, and my daughter's been wearing it. It's tight pants, and then Claire Potter, designer, added a 15-foot train, you know, that you drag. So I came out and I said, this little outfit, designed by Claire Potter, and that was the only designer that got a credit, you know, is designed specifically for washing dishes. Everybody roared. Then I said, let me show you how practical this is. You drape yourself in the doorway, and you say, a little more soap, honey. The hot water is to the left. And you straighten it out, and you say, you see how practical this is? And it doesn't even get dirty.
Cute.
Anyway, then I go down the range, and there's Claire Potter, and she's hugging me. She says, oh, honey, you stole the show. Anyway, a couple of weeks later, apparently Sally Kirkland, who is the mother of Sally Kirkland that we know.
So we know, of course.
She was the fashion editor. Fashion editor was next to God at Life at that
magazine,
point.
Right.
And she was in Claire Potter's thing, and she says, oh my God, I've got to do this layout on stoles, and I don't know who to get. And Claire Potter said, the world's authority on stoles is Vanessa Brown. So she said, you're right. She calls me up and she says, Miss Brown, if we could get you your favorite photographer, Philippe Holzman, and we would only take 2 hours of your time, would you mind doing this little layout that we have on stoles? I said, if I can do the captions, I'll do it. Fine. So we do the layout. Now comes, it's March 1953. I am watching the Middle East.
Right.
I am sure Mossadegh is going to get killed and I'm going to get bumped off the cover. I am watching every newscast. How is everybody that comes in, what's happening in the place where he's at? And they said, gee, I don't know, you know. And anyway, what happened was Tuesday, Marvin Cohn called me.
Right.
And he said, honey, the magazine went to bed.
Great.
What happened was the Russians had withheld the knowledge that Stalin had been dead for 3 days. Because the next girl on the next cover got bumped. For the successors to Stalin.
Right.
That's how I made life.
I love it. Tell me about this. I love this.
I love the
this
caption.
movie. Tell me.
Love the caption.
What's the caption? What does it say?
The caption is wonderful. It says, I'm not sorry for what I've done. I'd do it again.
What film is that?
This is called Girl of the Limberlost. It's based on an old classic.
Right.
And this was Mel Ferrer's first directing job. And it was Columbia.
And who's this? Who's this right here?
Where?
This one right here?
Let me look.
Who's that?
You know, I have lost touch with him.
You really?
That's Dorinda Clifton.
Right.
And I haven't seen her either.
I love
Some
this.
people you keep in touch with and some people you lose track of.
Vanessa Brown, look at this. Where is this?
That's Milton Green, who became Maryland's vice president. Remember? We did this layout before the 7-Year Itch in his studio in New York.
Great. Looking back over your career, you're happy?
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah.
Would you do it the same way, Vanessa?
I don't know that you can't second guess yourself. You know, you make decisions from time to time, and they're the valid ones. And
but you seem to have you would say you had a good time in your life so far.
I always have a good time. I mean, even in misery, I have a good time.
I don't know what you mean by that. Tell me.
I mean, you can have a choice. You have a choice. You can be miserable or you can be happy.
So you take it either way.
Well, you have to take it positively.
I see. So Vanessa Brown is a positive thinker then.
That's right.
You keep yourself positive. You keep yourself busy.
Very busy.
You have something new coming out. What is it?
We're doing a program called What Do You Want to Be Tomorrow, which has been about 11 years in the works. It was an outgrowth of the need expressed by my children. What am I going to do in life, Mom?
Interesting.
So I went over to the school, the Uni High School, and talked to the career guidance person, Linnea Reams, and she said to me, Mrs. Sandridge, the best I can do is I have the Ford dealer of West Los Angeles take 11 kids to lunch. And I looked at her, and she looked at me, and I said, in West Los Angeles, the best the people can aspire to is to be a Ford dealer?